Nigeria has plenty of solar projects on paper. What's the problem? It's getting them funded. Most never make it past proposal stage because nobody can figure out how to make them bankable. Today, I have Dr. Segun Adaju, who has done just that. He spent over a decade trying to solve the puzzle from Nigeria's first renewable energy financing desk to working for AfDB. He knows why money doesn't flow to projects that should work, and where the system keeps breaking down. Today, we're talking about money problems. I am Emeka Okpukpara. This is Connecting the Dots. Good day and welcome to another episode of Connecting the Dots. I have the pleasure of having Dr. Segun Adaju here with me, who is the CEO and founder of Consistent Energy. Segun, good afternoon. How are you?
Very well, Emeka. Thank you for having me.
Segun, our relationship has been going on for about 12 or so years
Right.
since we met back in the days of working with the Henrik Wolf Foundation
Correct.
on a few things. And I remember those conversations really being around how to get power to people, how to increase access to power
Right.
because of the issues that the grid has, and also because they have 100 million people who don't have access to power in Nigeria. But interestingly enough, the grid went down yesterday
Right.
for the ninth time since 2024. Um, how can you build an economy if the grid keeps going going down like that?
Wow, that's a very big challenge. There's a very strong correlation between the level of energy access in an economy and the level of development of that economy. Um, so if we continue to have this collapse, then I mean we're going to be very far away from economic development. Absolutely, and you can just imagine the impact of that collapse, what it will even take to restart those plants, I mean, and reconnect, citizens.
Hmm.
So it's really a big challenge. I mean, January already, and we're seeing the collapse. A big challenge.
And I think that's the problem a lot of people have with the sector because it's not predictable and it's not reliable, and you don't know what your costs are depending on what your usage is, because sometimes you have power, sometimes you don't, and with the way the sector is currently structured,
Right.
it's really hard to tell what your usage is.
Right.
Walk me through your journey in the sector. You were not always in the energy sector. You came from the finance side. How did you land on the energy sector?
All right. So, I never started as an energy practitioner. I started my career straight with banking. I've done, commercial, retail, and even up to microfinance banking level, right? So I believe that every stage of my career has prepared me to operate in the energy space. First, let me start from the last pivot I had from microfinance. So I had very good opportunity to engage what we call the base of the pyramid markets, SMEs, rural communities, doing micro lending without collateral, and then, of course, dimensioning risk and the rest. In the regular commercial banking, trying to understand bankability of projects, um, to be able to know if financing, what we think there are markets that cannot pay. How possible is that?
But from what I remember, you were one of the pioneer microfinancers in Nigeria, correct?
Yes, yes.
How did you take that risk? What made you take that leap of faith?
Okay, so I've always been interested as a banker. Of course, commercial banker. I lived in communities where I see that I could offer my service
Mm,
to people around me, particularly in terms of financing and even maybe simply opening an account. Unlike today, where you can easily on your app open accounts with some of these tech-enabled banking platforms. So that's created that urge in me, and I started reading about. I mean, I think I read a book by Hamed and Prahalad. It's called "Fortune at the Base of the Pyramid." That
mhm,
started it all.
mm.
And I started, as an economist and a banker, that look, I can provide simple solution to on South markets. So by faith, um, microfinance banking license came, and I didn't think twice. Just called a friend of mine that we need to take this jump. It was a crazy jump that many of my colleagues in those days say, this is on a suicide mission, really. But with the benefit of hindsight, I think, I mean, I'm glad I took that jump because that's what led me into understanding the BOP markets.
Mm.
Creating energy access basically is my tough right now.
That's but that wasn't the only jump you taken, right? Because you designed the renewable energy desk, or you helped support that program at UNDP that created a couple pilots, which obviously has launched NAP, DAMs, and all, even the GIZ IMS programs. So what made you from banking, you saw the bottom of the pyramid, and now you went into renewable energy and then came over to the development bank side and to the UN side and started that work. What was that journey like?
Okay, so I can say maybe I've been luck. Can I say luck? I've been lucky, maybe privileged, um, to take some initiatives,
Mm,
especially crafting new markets. Um, and also maybe my reading a book by I've forgotten the author now. It's called Blue Ocean Strategy. So I just like to go to market spaces that people haven't been to, right? So I was also a consultant after microfinance experience, working with United Nations Development Program and some other development partners. And then I got to Bank of Industry, and the idea of financing, renewable energy came to play. And at that time, no one was number one even thinking of deploying renewable energy because of the very low level of awareness and not talk of financing. I mean, today financial institutions are doing financing of solar, for example. I mean, it was almost impossible then. So it was also a privilege to develop those models, and right from Bank of Industry, and also the opportunity to create, for example, the green finance strategy for Development Bank of Nigeria. Um,
so you created that? You were part of that team?
yes,
Oh,
green
interesting.
finance strategy as a consultant
Interesting.
for DBN, Development Bank of Nigeria.
Mhm.
And today, DBN is accredited as a national accredited entity for Green Climate Fund. They were the first in Nigeria, and I mean raising some fund to deploy through
Mhm.
participating microfinance. I mean PFIs, participating financial institutions.
Interesting.
Right.
So that means they have green financing able for like a commercial bank to tap
To
into
unlend,
to
yes,
use.
yes.
Interesting.
To most
Which
beneficiaries.
commercial banks are playing strongly in that space?
Um, a few banks. I mean, I could mention some of those names, right?
Sure.
Sterling, FCMB,
Hmm.
Access. I know Fidelity is also in the game, UBA, and it's spreading very fast. I understand the likes of even Wema. The other day, Keystone Bank had a long conversation with me about getting into this space, and then a lot of microfinance institutions are also in this space now. It's exciting. Yeah.
And it's also one space that it's an immovable asset for the most part, because once you install solar on your roof or on your compound, it's difficult to move. So what made banks a little bit gun shy in investing or in supporting the sector?
Okay, so number one, I would say level of awareness, and also their understanding of the perceived risk.
Mm.
So I tell my colleagues in the banking industry that's still there, and I say, yeah, I understand your position. If you're probably still sitting on your desk and maybe thinking the way you are, but I've flipped roles and I'm on the other side. And you're losing big if you're not playing this market. So I understand because I mean the whole depositors fund,
Mm-hmm.
their level of risk must be high to ensure that money given out is returned.
Brings
But
back in.
let's see how my own mindset also changed. And like you rightly mentioned, it started from our days doing bits for Henry Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I developed a concept note for HBS in those days about pay as you go solar.
I remember that. I
Yes, many
remember that.
years, over
Mm-hmm.
10, 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is look, you could introduce a technology that could help payments and collections and make life easy. But banks, as at that time, will still be asking for collateral.
So I,
I mean, you want to install solar for a barber shop to change the place that generator is using. I mean, what collateral will you be asking for? Meanwhile, I was in Standard Trust Bank, I remember very well in those days. And we're financing motorcycles for
with
military
assets
officers.
that
Exactly. Asset that can disappear, can move from here and cross the border in 30
that's it.
minutes.
Yeah.
So panels that you're going to fix on the roof has less, risk of being movable. And I remember I was taking up on that and I asked a simple questions. I mean, question, right? That's how many of us have this then DSTV was, that dish that they put on the roof. How many of us have DSTV here? About a couple of hands. Say, how many of your dishes has been stolen? None, because they're fixed on the roof. And so that started to create that awareness that yeah, this asset might not be as movable as we think. And in my career of powering SMEs, installing solar on residential household, none of our panels have been stolen. None.
Interesting. And given that you ran the Renewable Energy Association for what,
6 years.
6 years, that that experience also then tells me that you've been part and parcel of how this industry has been shaped. I remember conversations with banks around solar as it's not trustworthy. There'll be all these challenges with the standards. Because if we finance something that's substandard, the person won't pay, then you'll have issues. How have we tied up that risk?
Okay, so yeah, truly, when we many of us got into this space, there were, I mean, it already had a bad name. Many people feel solar will not work.
Why is that? Was it because of how the previous sets of installations of what they call commissioning day solar that would work that day,
That's right.
and then you come back tomorrow and it's not
Absolutely.
working?
Absolutely. For example, street lights.
Street lights. There's
Yeah,
a
it
few in my
was
village 20 years ago that my father, who's very educated, would say, this thing doesn't work. Solar
uh,
doesn't work. It's like, no, it works, but it's just,
the quality. Yes. So that was the challenge as at that time. People felt, no, this will not work. It will not power my system. So what did we do? That's when we introduced financing. That let me deploy this system. I remember the first barber shop we did. We deployed that system and say, use this for 3 months. If it doesn't work, then we don't have a deal. It was this after the first month, I mean, to 2 weeks after the first month, about 6 weeks, the guy said, this is working very well. I mean, how much is it? And we told him how much is it. As at that time, about $1,000 equivalent. And he was like, no, no, I mean, I can't pay for
mhm,
this. That's why when we brought in financing. So how did we move beyond that? Number one, you are taking the risk by deploying to an SME and say, use pay me only when it works. That's number one. Number two, we offer warranties. Today, I mean, batteries can go as far as 5 years warranty. So with warranties, the market started to accept, particularly replacement warranties where the system is faulty. You just simply bring another one and take this away, and that's where we are now. That
mm,
I'm able to de-risk the market in terms of the fear of well, systems not working.
interesting. So the consumers are now believe that solar can truly work. That's what you're pretty much saying.
Right. I mean, 85, 90% of the time they do. There's still some level of inertia about okay, can you power large equipment? I was in a meeting of of a residential estate, and they were saying, "Oh, solar is just a, we need the grid because solar cannot carry my ACA." And I said, "No, I mean that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There are heavy solar plants even in Nigeria today. Um, uh, Thanks to the Rural Education Agency, many universities have been powered by solar
Mm-hmm.
with battery backup, heavy appliances, and the rest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um, there, there's also a school of thought around the quality. I'm going back to quality because I wanted to ask this question around the work that E- SON, Senate Coalition of Nigeria, and NEMSA have. Remember back in 2019, 2018, there was a bit of, it wasn't quite clear who was in charge of ensuring that the standards were met at the right level. Have those issues been handled, and how have we been able to ensure that the solar that the panels, batteries that come in are at the highest quality?
Okay, so globally, renewable energy, particularly solar, let me say, take solar panels, for example, has gone, I mean, it's no longer rocket science. It's been proven that this technology works. The challenge is the fact that substandard products still find their way into the market. That's the
Mm-hmm.
biggest challenge. SON, the NEMSA, they've tried their bit, but Nigeria is a large market. I mean, at the last count I had, the VPS, they say 240. Wow. That's the kind of population we're dealing with now.
Meanwhile, our power output on the grid has stayed consistently at 4,005.
Yeah, thereabouts.
Interesting.
Okay, so substandard products still find their way in, but there are top grade tier one products in the market that you know that this will not fail. This will work. There may be few manufacturers defect here and there, but with warranties, that is covered. So there's still a challenge between the roles. I mean, SON, for example, if you are bringing in solar panels, into the country or products, there's what we call the sun cap that you have to get.
Hmm.
So we're expecting this to also sanitize the market. But the issue of implementation and particularly enforcement needs to be strengthened. Um, and I advise the market that we need to begin to deploy the NAFDAC model, where you can actually go into the market and check
Hmm.
and see if anyone has brought in those substandard products, confiscate and maybe penalize.
Hmm.
So until we get to that point, you see a blend of high quality products coming in, even locally high quality products being assembled, and yet some substandard products get to the market.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
One of the issues I remember is around the fee waiver for import duty waiver that solar panels were supposed to get. And I remember there was a bit of a quagmire between Ministry of Finance and Customs around if it would be allowed. Has that changed, or are we still in that bit of back and forth?
Okay, so the issue of incentives and waivers is really is a delicate, matter, if I can use that word, because you also need to balance between level of importation and also the incentive for local production. So
Mm,
there's that's challenge. But markets that scaled in renewable energy technologies initially created some incentives to drive adoption, to create affordability, and those could include custom duty waivers, VAT exemptions, and the rest. But it's not a strategy that is required to last forever. It's to build up the markets. Yeah. Maybe Nigeria could have done that some years back. But today we're also looking at local production. So it's something that's why I say it's delicate, something we need to balance up. But still, countries even that's been on this on this beat for many years, they still provide some incentives. Maybe to the end user. So, for example, saying if you have solar on your rooftop, there are some rebates you might get, some tax waivers you might get, um, and that encourage the end use, a leg of the market. And I also say, for example, Rural Electrification Agency deploying programs under the both the Nigerian Electrification Project and the DARES, creating end use, an end user subsidies is a strategy. So my take will be yes, we still need some kind of incentive and support in some level of waivers and the rest, but we also need to consider local production. But for a market, you can also overprotect local production because if it's an open market, you can also protect forever.
Of course, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And there's a few people who are producing solar panels in Nigeria. I think Oxano
Oxano?
is one of them, but I've also learned that they're having serious challenges. This was a couple years ago because a lot of products they produce, when people compare it to what they can import from pick any country, is actually more expensive. So these people who are producing panels here are now having to sell their panels to other African countries as opposed to selling in Nigeria. Is that still the case, or have we gotten some improvements in the cost comparison?
Okay. I should think so. I mean, I'm not involved in local assembly and manufacturing, but I think it should be the same. I mean, I speak to Oxano, the LPV, and some other local companies in manufacturing and assembling. The challenge is, China can beat you in your game in terms of,
Pricing, of
competition
course.
numbers.
Hmm.
There are a lot of probably incentives in their market that encourage um, low pricing, especially for export products. And in Nigeria, you have to deal with a lot of things, taxes you have to pay. You have to provide your own base load power to run in manufacturing.
Hmm.
You have to do your infrastructure that adds on to the cost of the final product. But I think so far so good. Most of these companies are beginning to compete favorably with imported items. And I also hear that China might likely, particularly solar panels, sometime in March, there's some incentives provided in China that the Chinese government is thinking of yanking off, taking away. So that might likely be creating that competitiveness
Mm.
with local manufactured items.
Interesting,
Yeah.
because there's also a thought that some of these companies should come and set up local plants here to now supply the hub, but to supply the West African hub. But creating local capacity is so important because we can't benefit from just electricity. We need to benefit from the entire value chain, and that's how we create jobs,
Right.
more especially green jobs, which are very important in keeping the green energy
Right.
sector alive. So I want to move on to talking through the forex conversation, which reinforces the need to create more local products. How does forex affect your business? Has it been a challenge over the last 18 months, maybe 12 months? The exchange rate has largely stayed pretty consistent. How has that affected your business from a fluctuation point of view, and then just from having to buy things in a different currency?
Okay, so like you rightly mentioned, the last 18, maybe 18 months thereabout, there's been some level of stability, and that's a welcome development, right? But let me take a typical case study of a transaction we went into around 2021, 2022. I think it was 2022. It was a line of credit we got, and we locked in at 461 naira to a dollar.
Ooh.
And today we have to pay back at, I mean, at the time it was 1,800. Today, at best, 1,450.
Wow.
Let me say 1,500. So you can see the difference.
Mhm.
That is the disruption that, you know, foreign exchange fluctuations can cause
Yeah.
in a business. I mean, you took money in foreign currency at 461, you're paying back at 1500, and your revenue is in local currency. It's a dead on arrival, business, right? But today is so it can actually disrupt a lot of numbers. But good enough, there's some local platforms that are already also solving this challenge. For example, the likes of infra credits,
Mm-hmm.
lending in local naira, or giving guarantees that are also naira backed, funding from the likes of Development Bank of Nigeria and Bank of Industry
Mm-hmm.
that's also priced in local currency and local interest rate. Yeah, so we need to develop more of such. And within the National Credit Guarantee Company also coming in, you can also take guarantees to back local currency loans. Yeah,
And I do remember All On even had a program where they aggregated purchase
right,
to be able to buy the equipment for everyone and then bring it in so the exchange risk is not taken on by the consumer, because that's one thing I always fear is that when you depend solely on importing things in, you're at a risk of the global economy,
right,
depending on how it goes. And then given how what our inflation numbers look like, it worries me. But it sounds like we're getting to a place, but we still need to do more in
right.
order to incentivize our local manufacturing. For instance, batteries. 3 years ago, lithium was the hottest thing in Nigeria, right? All these mines, people were mining lithium and shipping it out. But batteries are mostly lithium ion. So it's almost like, why can't we just couple and create the things here to be able to avoid having to import the batteries in? Just from the work you do, is there anyone imports making batteries in Nigeria?
Uh, I'm not aware of
Yeah,
any
I'm not either. I was just
currently.
hmm
I mean, lithium batteries, none that I'm aware of, but I know that some of those block lead acid batteries at the time, the likes of Ibeto,
hmm
was try their
when
hands,
the
but
day went on it.
yeah,
Yes, yes,
the
yes.
competitiveness is also an issue. But I think it's something that we also, I mean, the regulators should encourage local production of those items. There's a company also that's also trying to get into battery assembly. I'll try and figure out their names.
Interesting.
And I understand that there was a time one of the major players globally, I probably mention their names, wanted to come in and mine lithium and take it out for manufacturing and come resell the batteries to us. And the government, particularly Mr. Vice President, says, no, you need to come set up here and do that production here, which for me, I think it was good.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hoping to see companies coming in and, beginning to produce particularly batteries in Nigeria.
Yeah, no, that's that'll be great once that process starts. Um, there's been real conversations around the cost of power. I remember when we looked at the cost of power in Nigeria based on when the grid tariffs were around 17 naira. You could see that solar was uncompetitive because of just it was so the grid was subsidized and it was so cheap. But now that I think it's 60% of the country is non on that are connected to the grid are not on band A, they're paying 209 naira per kilowatt hour. Solar is now at a point where it's even cheaper than the grid if you just have solar without the redundancies of batteries. How, and then also given that a number of Nigerians don't hold the typical 9 to 5 business people as SMEs. I think you quoted that there's 40 million SMEs in Nigeria. So the cash flow is quite fluctuates up and down. How has that worked? Do you have Nigerians who default on payments because of just how their cash flow is set up, or are you able to set up a model that allows people to pay when they're supposed to ensure your cash flows are not interrupted?
Okay, so for the market, you're right. The issue of can I say grid parity now? I mean, price
Hmm.
of grid electricity and price of renewables, particularly solar. At the initial stage, it was you know not competitive because the grid was highly subsidized. But today, subsidy is becoming a thing of the past gradually, if not totally. And then we're having the likes of Band I remember the first set of mini grids that were installed and the pricing. It was,
400 plus, right?
I mean, it was almost impossible.
Yeah.
Then grid was doing like 45 naira at most. And then you are in one rural community, you are charging 280 naira per kilowatt hour, 300, and you find rural communities paying. It was incredible. But today, of course, that price has more stabilized because of efficiency of deployment and the rest. So today, there are some customers on distributed renewable energy, particularly solar, who pay less than what the grid is charging. I hear some commercial and industrial installation can be as low as 165, 168 naira per kilowatt hour
Wow,
on energy as a service, right?
that's incredible.
As compared to the grid. And then you are guaranteed of availability. I mean, because 99.9%, if I'm on an energy as a service, particularly the telcos, if you don't meet my supply by 99.9%, I could call on the service level agreement
Of course.
because there should be no downtime
Mm-hmm.
on just towers, right?
Because that's also part of the beautiful thing about productive users,
Productive use, yeah,
because they need it to run their business.
right.
So I'm just surprised that a number of SMEs, or even the large SMEs that have the knowledge and the finance and haven't gotten involved into really driving into switching their diesel sets out and going for panels. Why do you think that is? Is it financing? Is it knowledge? Is it what do you think that the big challenge there is?
The biggest challenge in this market is finance
Mm,
across all the value chain. That means availability of funding. Okay, so for example, right from the customer, they don't have the capacity to buy these technologies. I mentioned that if you want to displace this tiny generator that in SMEs use, Baba's shop particularly, there's a funny name it's called. They are better past my
my
neighbor,
neighbor, yeah.
right?
Hmm.
You need at least $1,000. Today is about 1.5 million naira. The Baba will tell you, I mean, I don't have 1.5 million naira to pay you. So that's finance at that leg. And then they approach an organization um, who wants to power 1,000 of such SMEs. That means it needs $1 million. He goes to a bank, the bank says, "So sorry, I don't understand the market, I can't give you money." So there's a gap,
Hmm.
in the funding platform, right? Meanwhile, the barber shop is already incurring expenditure at a higher rate
Great.
than what the kilowatt hour of that renewable energy will have provided.
Mm-hmm.
So let's break it down. So I need $1,000 to displace that generator, 1.5 million naira. And SME buys a generator, it used to be 12,000 naira. Today it's almost 50K to buy that generator. They buy fuel, let's say 4 liters or 5 liters every other day.
Hmm.
Do that numbers, maybe it's 800 naira per liter now. I don't know how much it is now. In 1.5 years,
If
2 years at
Yeah,
most, the SME has incurred expenditure on the generator that will have paid for the solar system.
of course.
So a smart, maybe a former microfinance banker will come into the space and say, "Hey, I see a business here. Let me raise money. I deploy to the barber shop at zero or little down payments and say, pay me every week. And then in 18 months or 2 years, I recover my money plus interest. And then the customers, the SME owns that system. That's a model already. And we're seeing that being scaled. It's becoming very interesting. People are residential household are adopt. Bankers are getting wiser now and say, wow, there's money to be made here. Some of the banks I mentioned, they're actually financing systems. As I speak, across the country, many of our installations are currently going on as I speak to you on a Saturday. Right?
Interesting.
Interesting. Financed by banks.
Interesting.
Right.
At the height of your, when you really targeted barbershops, which I thought was a really good idea, you had almost 5,000 barbershops.
Okay, so the total installations that we have done, let me say so there's MSMEs, micro, small, and medium enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
They are close to that's 40 million by National Bureau of Statistics numbers. It was 41.5 before COVID, but it came down to about 39 million. So virtually all of them require some level of energy at different level. Some require solar lantern just to light up their shop so that you can see and buy, right? But some need, energy. Yeah. So totally, we've done, over 10,000,
Wow.
including Pico Solar, that's solar lantern, solar home systems, and then what we call solar generators now, the space system. So for SMEs, let's say barber shop, over 1,000 of them running. Some are fully paid back. Some are still using the system.
What's
Only
the default
installation
rates? The default rate for your barbershop.
default rates. For barbershops, because we work with associations, so we don't deploy to any barbershop. You must belong to an association. So your credit is rated through that association. Your leadership must be aware of that you're taking a loan from, and those guys are much, much more organized than regular, elites like you and I. Take a typical example, Nigeria, what's it called? NURTW. Very organized. One guy makes a law here. In my village, that law is law. The driver dare not. So that's the kind of framework we work on. And they ride on it. And 95% of the time, they pay little default, maybe business downtime, or somebody lost someone that's closed the shop for 2 months to go bury the dead. Basically.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So this default rate is definitely lower than default rates at other financial instruments that are out there.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting that banks haven't quite caught on, but as you said, they're getting to the process to really understand,
Right.
and we're seeing a lot more of them asking questions and really inquiring on
Right.
how to get involved. So Shagan, as we wrap up here, what would you say this industry would look like if you were to look into the future by 2030? Do you think we will have more renewable energy assets v- pushing out more megawatts than the grid?
2030. So the plan of Nigeria is to do 30% renewables. But between you and I see much more than that by 2030.
Interesting.
And I'll give you my reasons. Number one, over 40%, I think, of Nigerians are not connected to national grid. The figure is about 80 million, 88 million, 85 million, whatever report you are reading. The chances of those guys being connected to the grid is getting slimmer. Why? Cost of infrastructure of extending the grid is getting higher at dollar rates. Nigeria also we have many other needs. It's not only power. We're going to put all our maybe 50 trillion naira budget on. Even some of those that are connected to the national grid. I was reading the reports that on the average across Nigeria, we have 6.5 hours of power every day. Average.
You can't grow an economy.
6.5.
You can't grow an economy.
Hours. Okay, so you can't run an economy. And so what is the fastest, quickest, and cheapest way to power Nigerians, especially the unserved and the underserved? Is distributed renewable energy. My projection is that by 2030, okay, don't let me be too ambitious, maybe up to 2050, half of Nigeria will be on decentralized energy powered by renewables.
Interesting.
Interesting because it's an opportunity also to leapfrog like we did on telephoning, right? Many of us didn't have landlines in our homes.
That's to start with.
I mean, straight to mobile. That is distributed, a business model that I see Nigeria running on. I mean, the day the grid collapsed, I never even knew until I saw in the media that, oh, the grid has collapsed. I'm
The
running on
melody,
distributed
yeah.
energy. I mean, that is hybrid, but it's just a click
Mm-hmm.
between, I mean, is it
Second,
milliseconds they call
in
it,
the
or even
changeover,
nano,
yeah.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It switches to my rooftop solar, and I probably won't know apart from one or two appliances that will shut down and not work. So this is where we're seeing Nigerian. We're seeing a lot of mini grids going in. We're seeing companies, particularly members of Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria, deploying mini grids all over the place. I saw a report recently that InfraCredit funded another organization to do a mesh grid.
Mm-hmm.
That is the conversation that we're going to see.
Going.
Right.
So there's a comparison between Nigeria and Pakistan back in the day as far as having similar dynamics. And power was always an issue in Pakistan. But the last 5 years, not an issue anymore because of distributed renewable energy. They've been able to figure out how to do clusters, 5 megawatts here, 3 megawatts here, and now they're now have almost their power rate has tripled over the past five years because they've
Right.
been able to do it.
Right.
So your prediction, if we sat here 10 years ago and talked about how many mini grids there'll be in Nigeria,
Right.
we wouldn't be able to guess that we'll have hundreds of mini grids in
That's correct.
Nigeria. But now there are. So in the
Right.
next 5 years, I'm betting that there will be way more, probably 40-50% of Nigerians will have a form of renewable energy in their location, either at their house or in their on their business.
Right.
And I think government is aligned with all the different things that have happened.
Right.
But if there was one thing you could say to wrap up as far as giving government an advice on how to deploy, how to enable the space, because in my opinion, government is really there to enable the sector. What that one thing be?
Okay, so I've tried to figure out what that one thing would be from governments. So I'll assume, I mean, government,
Government or private sector?
yes, okay. Private sector, of course, is for practitioners like you and I to take that risk and also take that jump. I mean, the market is really big right now. I must be honest with you. Financial institutions to create the money. I mean, just put together the balance sheet of banks in Nigeria alone is it's huge. And remember that every year, averagely about 15 billion US dollars is spent by Nigerians to fuel their generators.
Mm.
That is money that is waiting to be switched into
Mm-hmm.
renters, energy as a service per kilowatt hour
Mm-hmm.
payments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. On the government side, of course, to continue to democratize, energy. Energy is not public good that government will have to provide for free to everyone. Okay, encourage commercial and private sector participation, um, and then implement some of the laws that are made. But there's one of the critical success factors that Pakistan deployed: net metering.
Yes. Yes.
Net metering. So I'm seated here now. What time is it? Almost 1 p.m. And my rooftop, my batteries will be fully charged.
Mm-hmm.
Extra generation that's going because the panel will keep generating as long as the sun is shining.
Mm-hmm.
It's wasted.
So you
So I
start
should
them
be able
up.
to sell to Ikeja Electric
Mm-hmm.
and take some money at the end of the month.
Mm-hmm.
Some nets, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Pakistan did that, and that encouraged deployments. I think it's something we need to. I don't know how we're going to figure it out. I know there's a challenge to say, look, if you plug renewables onto the grid now, there's a bit of a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
fluctuations,
Sure.
but we need to figure it out and deploy net metering framework in Nigeria to encourage
Mm.
adoption and deployment.
That's a really good idea, and it's something that we've talked to the regulator about in the past. But given the technology changes, and how the involvement of technology, rather, it's something that I believe that they're thinking through to do.
Right.
Shagun, thank you so much for the time. And
A
whenever I
pleasure.
sit with you, I learn so much. and I become very hopeful about the sector. So thank you for the plunge, and also thank you for keeping evolving your work and really tying your finance experience to renewables and now merging them together. So we will get there with people like you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Segun.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and it's always a pleasure.